covered today. Along with the recording of this material, the webinar slides and many other informational resources, including computer-based training courses and other initiative-related recorded webinars, I will show you how to find on our Learning Center later in this presentation. There will be breaks during the discussion when the operator will open the phone lines for verbal questions, and ample time has been set aside for your questions. If you have questions throughout the presentation that you want to have addressed, you can also type your question in the chat at any time, and the moderator will read it on your behalf during the Q&A sessions. If we can't answer your questions right away, we'll research the topic and email a response to all the participants. So a little bit of housekeeping. Please make sure to mute yourself unless you have a question. If you have questions, you may either ask over the phone or in chat. And if you want to ask a question, you can comment or virtually raise your hand through WebEx. Now, approximately 2/3 of the United States and more than half of Canada is broken up into 9 energy regions. Independent System Operators, or ISOs, Regional Transmission Operators, or RTOs, are the federally regulated regional organizations that perform the same functions of coordinating, controlling, and monitoring the operation of the electrical power system, as well as acting as a marketplace for wholesale power for these regions. Similar to a stock exchange, an ISO never actually owns or takes title to the energy that is purchased and sold, and only acts as a mechanism to bring buyers and sellers of the energy and energy services together. The California ISO is one of these entities and resides in the Western regional area known as the Western Interconnection. Though the ISOs and RTOs have different ways of operating their grids and markets, we all participate together in the ISO-RTO Council that is committed to work together to build a smarter and more efficient grid that is prepared to meet North American market and consumer needs. During this course, we'll be focusing on the California ISO and its processes, but it's important to note that if you're doing work with other ISOs, be aware of the differences in how they all operate, and the terminology will be great benefit in allowing your interaction to be more successful. Like many other ISOs, the California ISO is a nonprofit benefit corporation. We're responsible for the constant and reliable flow of electricity for the health, safety, and welfare of consumers, but unlike a public utility, we are profit neutral, independent, and we do not serve end-use customers. We operate the transmission system, but not the distribution lines. Those are operated and maintained by the utilities, who also perform maintenance on generators and transmission systems. Unlike the utilities, we do not own any transmission or generation assets, and we do not take ownership of the energy on the system. We do, however, coordinate the maintenance of these grid facilities to ensure efficient resources are available to meet the needs of consumers. The ISO facilitates a fair and transparent wholesale electric market, and we accomplish that through our policies, planning, and initiatives. We provide state-of-the-art technology that allows for enhanced situational awareness of the state of the bulk electric system to help grid operators maintain reliability and keep the lights on. We have a comprehensive transmission planning process to accommodate the need for system expansion, as well as clear the way for clean, green resources to access the grid. We actively engage with state and federal entities to support policy and regional goals for integration of more distributed and clean power products and improve coordination over larger geographical areas to enhance reliability and lower costs. The ISO is located in the Western Interconnection, which is represented here. In addition to being an ISO, we're also registered as a balancing authority, or BA. While all ISOs are BAs, not all BAs are ISOs. A balancing authority area, or BAA, is a combination or set of intertie points and resources. and the balancing authority is responsible for matching generation and load while maintaining electrical frequency of the grid. There are 39 separate BAs in the West, each with the same core functions of preparing the system for the next day's operation using resources within their boundaries, as well as taking into account imported energy from neighboring BAs and matching changing supply with changing demand in real time. The ISO is the largest BA in this region, handling an estimated 36% of the electric load in the Western interconnection. Utilities such as investor-owned utilities or public utilities sit inside of the boundaries of a BAA, and their energy may be shared throughout the entire interconnection, enhancing reliability through greater resource pools, as well as helping achieve renewable generation targets and managing costs. As this energy is shared between BAAs, continual communication and accurate tracking the BAs is critical to maintaining situational awareness of the grid. Electronic tagging, or e-tagging, tracks the energy that is scheduled to flow between BAAs. E-tags contain data that allow us to model where energy is being produced and consumed and what transmission lines are being utilized for reliability and settlement purposes. As a grid operator, the ISO makes sure the lights stay on in our balancing authority area. Every BA uses a different means to accomplish this. As a market operator, the ISO supports reliability by running markets for energy and capacity. We use these markets to balance supply and demand across a large operational footprint and ensure that we are operating the transmission systems within appropriate limits. The market provides price transparency that is reflective of the system conditions. We facilitate non-discriminatory grid access to supply and demand, and we have mechanisms to ensure that the grid is secure in the case of a contingency event. If a system outage were to occur, there is a coordinated process to restore systems to a normal state. Additionally, the ISO also handles coordination among BAs in its role as a reliability coordinator, known as RC West. On November 1st, 2019, the ISO became officially reliability coordinator of record for 41 electrical balancing authorities and transmission operators across 14 western states and northern Mexico. RC West now has oversight of power grid reliability for balancing authorities and transmission operators in the Western interconnection, monitoring compliance for 87% of the load in the Western United States. A reliability coordinator has the highest level of authority and responsibility for the reliable operation of power grids and has a wide visibility of bulk electric systems. RC West monitors interconnected power grids in the West for compliance with federal and regional standards, determines measures to prevent or mitigate system emergencies in day-ahead or real-time operations, and leads system restoration following major incidents. The series of milestones the ISO completed to launch the service are listed at the bottom of this slide. An ISO and BA, we must adhere to strict oversight from key agencies, which include FERC, NERC, and WEC. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, is an independent U.S. federal entity that is the regulator of our market and as such has jurisdiction over interstate electricity sales, wholesale electricity rates, natural gas, and oil pipelines, reliability standards for the bulk energy system. FERC reviews the ISO's market rules and transmission rates to ensure they are just and reasonable and do not create undue preferences or discrimination under the Federal Power Act. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation is the international regulatory authority whose mission is to assure the reliability and security of the bulk power systems in North America. NERC works with all stakeholders to develop and enforce standards for power system operation physical and cybersecurity, and system operator preparedness, and then enforces compliance with those standards. They also work with the North American Energy Standards Board, or NAESB, to develop standards, including e-tagging standards. The Western Electrical Coordinating Council, or WEC, is a nonprofit corporation responsible for coordinating and promoting bulk electric system reliability in the geographic area known as the Western Interconnection, which is displayed on an earlier slide. Here you see a chart of how the ISO is structured, which includes the various teams that you would most likely interact with. Using our Board of Governors as a starting point, you can see the relationship between the departments, committees, and regional entities. Our board is comprised of 5 members that each serve a staggered 3-year term and are appointed by the Governor of California. Our Department of Marketing, Monitoring, or DMM, is responsible for ensuring that the market remains competitive by analyzing market trends and market initiatives, identifying potential anti-competitive market behavior or market inefficiencies, and enforcing FERC decisions. In order to provide transparency, the Department of Marketing Monitoring produces regular reports that are available on our website. The DMM is overseen by the Department of Marketing Monitoring Oversight Committee, an independent group that reports directly to our board. We also have an audit committee that's tasked with oversight of ISO's budget and financial operations. The Western ERM governing body is ancillary to the Board of Governors and exercises delegated authority from the Board of Governors over Western energy imbalance markets rules. Though not pictured here, it is important to note that 2 other groups that the EIM governing body works closely with. The Body of State Regulators and Regional Issues Forum. The Body of State Regulators includes representation from 8 states responsible for advising the EIM governing body and ISO boards on matters of interest, while Regional Issues Forum is the public vehicle for stakeholders to discuss EIM-related issues, including impacts to neighboring balancing authority areas. For those who may have seen past presentations, you may have noticed that we have several changes in leadership overall structure here at the ISO. As of late 2020, our president and CEO is Elliot Mainzer. A newly created role we have is Mark Rothletter as the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. He is responsible for leading operations, policy, technology, infrastructure departments to better align efforts to develop and maintain a solid grid infrastructure, improve market performance through market design, working with state regulators and integrating renewables into the market, manage market and systems applications as well as all corporate applications while maintaining the highest standards of cybersecurity critical to ensure the safety of the grid and market operating systems as well as our customers. Maintain grid reliability by running a robust market operating the bulk electric system, providing oversight through reliability coordination and managing the process from bid to settlement. Other notable divisions include our legal and regulatory team that work with the ISO tariff and interacts with the FERC, the NERC, and the WEC, and other agencies when it comes to filings, compliance, and regulations. External and customer affairs that with customers both within the ISO footprint and regional level. These interactions cover everyday questions as well as forward-looking policies such as improvements to the ISO markets, EIM, and regional integration. Those of us on the customer readiness team are part of the external and customer affairs organization. With all the functions of the ISO, it is imperative that these boards, committees, and divisions work effectively together to serve the needs of our customers. Though we are not a state agency, we work with these agencies to implement state policy, perform studies, facilitate a fair and transparent wholesale electricity market, and drive innovation. The Air Resources Board's mission is to promote and protect public health, welfare, and ecological resources through the effective and efficient reduction of air pollutants while recognizing and considering the effects on the state's economy. One of their main focuses is limiting greenhouse gas emissions through programs that utilize renewable energy credits, or RECs. Generators can purchase these RECs in order to offset their air emissions and continue to operate facilities. The California Energy Commission, CEC, is responsible for the certification of electrical generation facilities as eligible renewable energy resources and adopting regulations for the enforcement of Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, procurement requirements of publicly owned utilities. The RPS is currently set as 60% of total energy procurement from eligible renewable sources by 2030, and the ISO is active in working to help achieve this goal. We also work with the California State and Assembly to effect changes in the industry. The Water Resources Control Board is focusing on once-through cooling issues. We have a number of generators in California that are close to the coasts and use seawater to aid in the conversion process of condensing steam back into water, which can have a detrimental effect on marine habitats. The Water Resources Control Board is coordinating a long-term effort with resources to find alternative ways to cool their plants or to possibly retire them. The ISO works with the Public Utilities Commission on resource adequacy and generation procurement. The CPUC implements and administers RPS compliance rules for California's retail sellers of electricity, which include large and small investor-owned utilities, electric service providers, and community choice aggregators. The CPUC adopted a resource adequacy, or RA, policy framework in 2004 in order to ensure the reliability of electric service in California. The CPUC established RA obligations available to all load-serving entities, or LSEs, within the CPUC's jurisdiction. The Commission's RA program guides resource procurement and promotes infrastructure investment by requiring that LSEs procure capacity so that the capacity is available to the ISO when and where needed. The Integrated Resource Plan is an umbrella planning proceeding to consider all of the Commission's electricity procurement policies and programs and ensure California has a safe, reliable, and cost-effective energy supply. Now, as I mentioned before, though we're not a state agency, we still want to help shape policies as they affect our customers and grid operations, so it is off to a great benefit for us to work closely with entities inside California as well as agencies outside of California. But we don't just work with regulatory agencies. Oversight boards and state agencies' partnership with our stakeholders is critical to the success of the ISO. Stakeholders' input is essential to ISO's planning process and for the success of new initiatives from policies development to implementation. We encourage you to participate in our stakeholder engagement opportunities. On our website, under Stay Informed tab, you will find information on our stakeholder initiatives. This page lists all the initiatives we're working on at the ISO and provides all of the papers and meeting schedules for those initiatives should you be interested in participating in the discussion. We are committed to providing ample chances for stakeholders' input into our market decision or market design, implementation, infrastructure planning activities. The stakeholder process will shape the market design and policies through a series of proposals, meetings, and comment periods, including changes to our tariff. A great deal of the documentation that we adhere to from a reliability and safety standpoint is defined by our federal and regulatory standards. Our primary document is our tariff, which outlines the rates, terms, and conditions under which the ISO operates. The tariff is modified in collaboration with our stakeholders through our stakeholder process. Pertinent FERC rules are codified in our tariff so that any wholesale exchange of electricity in our market comes under their purview. To view our tariffs and associated filings in a more user-friendly way, you can visit our e-tariff viewer that offers convenient access to all ISO-related files that are part of FERC's e-tariff system. We also have business practice manuals, or BPMs. The rules and the tariffs can be high level at some times, so our BPMs provide detailed rules, procedures, and examples for the administration, operation, planning, and accounting requirements of the California ISO and the market that are consistent with the ISO tariffs. Adherence to the manuals is important for orderly operation of the ISO market. Operating procedures guide the critical step-by-step actions of control room tasks. Some of these procedures are posted on our website, while others are confidential. The ISO is registered with NERC as a balancing authority, a transmission operator, and a transmission service provider, planning coordinator, market operator, and reliability coordinator. Together, all these roles are grouped in three main categories: reliability, infrastructure planning, and market operations. Let's take a look at each of these in a little more depth. As our industry moves into the future, we face challenges in competing priorities. Reliability is the foremost grid consideration, but is not the only consideration. As more renewables and green power products are added into the power mix, as we expand our horizons, we face challenges related to under or over supply and the need for more flexibility. When there is more electricity being generated than places to store or export it, or when there's too little supply, it could affect the reliability of the grid. The bottom line is that there are a lot of things we want to do, but there are costs, time, and impact considerations. Therefore, it's critical we coordinate with several entities to plan the transmission needs in the ISO Balancing Authority area. Transmission planning at the ISO is an open and transparent process that actively engages stakeholder and public input and uses the best engineering analysis possible to determine short and long-term infrastructure needs of the ISO transmission grid, which is comprised of over 26,000 circuit miles to maintain reliability and bring economic benefit to consumers. The ISO works closely with the CPUC and the CEC throughout the transmission planning process to identify and study reliability, policy-driven, and economically driven needs. Our transmission planning process begins annually and lasts 15 months. This process has two phases: project definition and evaluation, and a possible third for competitive solicitation for selected projects. In phase one, we are developing forward-looking assumptions. In phase two, we are performing analyses and identifying transmission needs. If approved by the ISO board, in phase three, we select proposals to build needed transmission projects. In phase one, to develop the detailed study plan is state and federal policy, CEC demand forecast, and the CPUC does the resource forecast, common assumptions with procurement process and other issues and concerns. Phase two is the sequential technical studies that include reliability analysis, renewable policy-driven analysis, economic analysis, and publish a comprehensive transmission plan to recommend projects. Just as we have a transmission planning process, we also have a robust generator interconnection process to help resources interconnect to the ISO grid. Our streamlined process helps resource owners understand the steps to interconnecting their resource to the ISO grid by providing requirement compliance information, as well as an assigned interconnection specialist to walk the entity through the entire process from the beginning through the commercial operations. Let's take a high-level look at this process. At a high level, the generator interconnection process starts when a resource submits a request to interconnect, kicking off the generator interconnection study to determine reliability impacts of the system and identify any upgrades that need to be made. This process takes just over 2 years to complete. After the studies and approval to move forward, interconnection agreements are signed, and then the New Resource Implementation, or NRI, process begins. Once this process is complete, the resource can begin participating in the market. The tariff allows 7 years for a project to reach its commercial operation date after the interconnection request is submitted. An important item to note is how critical it is to pay attention to the deadline dates. It is important to keep all projects moving forward as many processes are linked and feed one another. As one of the main tasks of the queue management specialist is to make sure the projects in the queue process are moving along and interconnection consumers are meeting their dates to ensure the generation resource can be interconnected in an efficient manner. An ISO typically has a competitive energy market, which most BAs do not have. As a registered market operator, we act as a marketplace for wholesale power, or basically a clearinghouse, under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. The ISO wholesale energy market is comprised of distinct day-ahead and real-time processes. The energy products and services traded in our market allow us to meet reliability needs and serve load. The day-ahead energy market enables parties with bilateral agreements to schedule their contracted supply and demand into the market, offload excess supply in the form of energy or ancillary services, and secure pricing due to changes in load forecasts or incremental changes in demand. Most demand is met in advance of the market through utility-owned or bilateral procured resources. The ISO's real-time energy market has the hour-ahead scheduling process, which enables import and export resources to schedule their megawatt hourly, as well as 15-minute market, or FMM, that allows variable energy resources, or VERs, such as wind and solar, to submit energy forecasts and economic bids closer to the financial binding interval, which increases bid accuracy. The 5-minute market is intended to meet the instantaneous demand that shows up in real time. The purpose of the day-ahead market is to ensure that there are adequate resources available and deliverable in real time. Energy is the actual electricity needed to meet the demand of the consumers. In general, much of the energy used within California is procured through bilateral contracts outside of the ISO's markets, in which supply is purchased under contract to meet demand. The energy needs to be scheduled into the ISO market so that the ISO can use the information to monitor the physical energy flows of the system. In most cases, energy that is procured outside of the Cal ISO markets is submitted as a self-schedule. The day-ahead market enables suppliers to submit into the market energy not under contract, enables buyers to produce additional supply in the event they do not have enough under contract to meet their demand. We use demand forecasts, which allow us to know how much energy will be needed in real time to meet the requirements. The ISO must project how much energy will be needed and how much will be available for the next day, the day after that, next week, next month, next year, and we do that through robust forecasting processes. The more accurate data we have, the more accurate the demand forecast. Therefore, the ISO is consistently working on improving load, wind, and solar forecasts in the day-ahead hour real time to timeframes to keep the lights on and lower cost for consumers. Now let's conduct a brief overview of the market timelines. We just talked about both day-ahead and real-time markets, and this diagram shows the relationship between the two. As you can see, they are very similar. The day-ahead market opens 7 days before the trade date and closes at 10 a.m. the day before. The day-ahead market is made up of 3 market processes that run sequentially. First, the ISO runs a market power mitigation test. Bids that fail the test are revised to predetermined limits. These market power mitigation measures are intended to provide the means for the ISO to mitigate the market effects of any conduct that would substantially distort competitive outcomes in the ISO's markets while avoiding unnecessary interference with competitive price signals. The second process is the integrated forward market, which establishes a generation needs to meet bid and demand. Market prices set are based on bids. And last, the residual unit commitment process secures capacity from additional resources in order to meet forecasted demand for the next day. These processes are co-optimized to produce a day-ahead schedule at least cost while local reliability needs. The final step of the day-ahead market is to publish the market results at approximately 1300 hours. When the day-ahead market is published, this triggers the opening of the real-time market. Bids are once again submitted along the base schedules from our EIN participants. Market processes run, bids clear the market, and dispatch orders are sent and received. The market is then settled in our post-market processes. So let's break this down a little further. This graph represents 1 hour in the day-ahead market. The SCs can submit different bid curves for each hour of the day. All the economic bids and sales schedules, both supply and demand, are placed on a curve. After we discuss the market processes, I'll take a little detour and talk about the different types of bids. On the left, we have bid prices. Along the bottom, we have megawatts. This is very simplified, but the green supply curve represents the supply bids lined up from the least expensive to the most expensive. The blue line has all demand bids on what demand is willing to pay. It is lined up from most expensive to least expensive. Now, where these two lines intercross represents the amount of supply and demand in megawatts that will clear in the day-ahead market. The definition of clear the market is if a resource submits a successful bid and will therefore be contributing its generation to meet the demand, it is said to clear the market. The cheapest resource will clear the market first, followed by the next cheapest option, and so on until demand is met. When supply matches demand, the market is cleared, and the price of the last resource to offer in, plus other market operation charges, becomes the wholesale price of power, PJM. This is the first step in our plan for the next day. Now, energy is needed to meet the demand and keep the lights on, but we also need capacity available to back up just in case instantaneous energy need. So ancillary services support the reliability operation of transmission system as it moves electricity from generating sources to retail customers. These are the 4 ancillary services that are procured in real time. Regulation corrects the short-term changes in electricity use that might affect the stability of the power system. These generators are under ISO control through Automatic Generation Control, or AGC, which allows us to move these resources every 4 seconds. Operating reserves at capacity produce designed to ensure reliability in the event of grid disturbance. For example, a large generator goes offline unexpectedly. The spinning reserves are synchronized to the grid and available to be dispatched as energy within a 10-minute period. Originally referred to the increased torque applied to a turbine generator's rotor, but today other types of resources can meet the need, storage for example. Non-spinning reserves are not synchronized to the grid, but can be synchronized and available for dispatch within 10 minutes. Now, there are regulatory requirements on how much of these services are that are needed. So the ISO procures regulating reserves based on procurement targets set by the ISO to meet WEC standards. Contingency reserves are procured based on targets set by WEC, and we have a residual unit commitment process to meet ISO system-wide and regional forecasts. So now what happens if the amount of energy that clears the market is less than the ISO predicts it will need? Let's review the residual unit commitment process. The market also analyzes bids for residual unit commitments to cover this gap. In many cases, this need is fulfilled by supply that is already dedicated due to a resource adequacy program that is part of California's mandate, but other suppliers can also offer product to provide this. So let's pause right here and let's see what questions we have. If you do have a question, you can enter it in the chat, or you can unmute and ask any questions that you may have.
Hi, all. If anyone wants to, like Rodney said, if you want to put a question in the chat, if you haven't found it yet, there's a bubble at the bottom. You can open up a chat there and see and send messages to us here. We can answer some questions. Or if you want to raise your hand next to your name, if you want to be called on, if you want to speak up, feel free to go ahead and click the button to, right click on your name and click to raise the hand, and we can answer your questions. Thanks. All right, Rodney, we do have a question. Western Electricity Coordinating Council, did I hear there are 47 member utilities in this council? Is that what it said on this slide, Rodney?
I believe so. If you can just refresh my memory.
It was on an earlier slide. I can take a look at that and verify. And I can also there's a link to the WEC website, and they're going to be able to let you know which one of those entities are all part of WEC. So I'll go ahead and look that up in the presentation. Oh, there you go. Slide was number 4 or 5 in the PowerPoint. So yeah, I'll take a look at that and also post the link to WEC's website. And I'll look at it and see where you can go on that website to find that information. So.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. All right, any other questions? That was a good question. We will get the answer for you. All right, let's move forward. So now the residual unit commitment process is a method of ensuring the reliability of the grid. RUC is used to bridge the gap between what cleared for each hour in the day ahead compared to what the demand forecast is for that hour. If a resource is awarded for RUC capacity, they will need to submit an energy bid in real time. There may be a payment for the capacity in the day ahead, and if we need the energy in real time, there will be an additional payment at the real-time price. One more thing we need to discuss is MPM. And when there are multiple resources available to serve load in an area, prices are competitive. But if there's only one resource available to serve the load, they can command the price. This is known as market power. For every hour, the day-ahead market runs a test to see if any resource has potential for market power. If the potential for market power is determined, the resource's bid will be mitigated to a more reasonable price if required. Resource bids that are mitigated are reduced to a cost-based bid, market power mitigation. Now, grid operators need an operating plan for the next day in order to ensure reliability. ISO uses this day-ahead market to create that plan. As a result, resources are committed to provide to supply to meet the need of the demand that is cleared in the market and supply to meet the ISO demand forecast, and ancillary services to meet the reliability requirements that we have in place. So before we take a look at economic bids and self-schedules, what questions do you guys have about the last couple of slides?
I'm seeing
Okay.
nothing in the chat, Rodney.
All right, so let's talk about economic bids and self-schedules. All of the day-ahead bids are submitted by scheduling coordinators. When a scheduling coordinator submits a bid for a resupply source, a supply resource, they provide us with the quantity of megawatts they're willing to offer at various price points. As the price increases, the quantity offered increases also. So I'll give you 10 megawatts if the price is $20, but I'll give you 50 megawatts if the price is $100. These prices are meant to reflect their cost of providing supply. And before I move on, let's go ahead and address the question. So Heidi, there's a question from Hank. Why is there no concern about market power?
Yes, I just saw that. And actually, there is a definite concern about the potential for market power. That's why we have market power mitigation. So it is a mechanism that's built in to work with the entities so that if there's a potential for being able to game the market, whether intentionally or unintentionally, we do have our Department of Market Monitoring works with the different entities, make sure that we have an identified default energy bid that can be input in place of a bid that may hinge on that market power. So it's definitely something that we look at. We look at it in the day ahead. And then later on, when we talk about the real-time market, there's also market power mitigation that's being checked for every interval that's going forward. So it is definitely a concern. And that's one of the big things that, like I said, our Department of Market Monitoring especially is looking at to make sure that that doesn't occur.
Thank you, Heidi. So if we take a look at so do the self-schedules get reviewed? That's the next question, Heidi.
The self-schedules do get reviewed as well. So what a self-schedule is when you're putting those in, it's basically, it's not a financial bid that you're putting in. It is just a signal of number of megawatts that you're willing to put in, and you're willing to take any price or pay any price. So if you're putting in a self-schedule, let's say a generator that is already accounting for supplying 80 megawatts, but you have an extra 20 megawatts on a particular resource that could be bid into the market. Since you're running anyway, you're getting paid for the megawatts that you're already awarded for. You could put in a self-schedule and just say, I'm going to bid these 20 megawatts into the market and let the market just pay whatever that market clearing price is. That's what I'm willing to take. So that's where it can't impact the market power mitigation, because it's a megawatt only that you're putting in there. And I see that you have a question about the bilateral self-schedules. And let's just one second. And then how about scheduling for regulatory requirements such as RATA? Hang on, and I'll get back to you on that. Let me get a little bit more information on those two questions. And when we have our next answer period, then I'll go ahead and answer those. All right? Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi. So speaking of the self-schedule, let's go ahead and take a look at this graphic here, and this will help hopefully clear up some of those questions. So the bid cap is $1,000 and the bid floor is $150. So the bid submitted must be within these ranges, so negative $150. The scheduling coordinator for demand also submits bids letting the market know how much they are willing to pay to buy the megawatts. So the lower the price, the more they're willing to buy. And that makes sense. So participants also have the ability to submit self-schedules, which are considered to be price takers. There are no offers to either supply or buy, no matter what the price. For example, a supplier could submit a self-schedule for 100 megawatts of energy. This tells the market they're planning on generating 100 megawatts tomorrow, regardless of price. Perhaps they have a contract with an LSE to provide those megawatts. On the other side of the coin is a load-serving entity could submit a self-schedule for 100 megawatts of demand in the day-ahead market. This is a signal to the market that they will buy no matter what the price the market clears. They might do this to ensure that they secure supply to serve their demand in advance of the real-time market because they feel like the price may be higher in real time. All of the self-scheduling coordinators have submitted their bids into the day-ahead market on the day before operating day. Here's how they stack up. Self-schedules are at the beginning of the curve because they are indifferent to the price, so they will clear the market. As I mentioned before, the place where the supply and demand curve cross indicates the amount of supply and demand that clear in the day-ahead market. In real time, any additional demand that shows up will be served by the real-time market at the real-time price. So if you look at the demand that is to the right of the cleared demand, these quantities will clear in real time. So here's an example of 5 different resource bids into the day-ahead market at $20. What differentiates them? The bids that suppliers submit have more than just a bid price for their energy. They also have supply additional information, such as the cost for starting up the unit and running at a minimum output. Even though all of these resources have a bid at $20, it may cost more to start up a gas-fired generator than a wind resource. So the market will award the wind resource in lieu of the gas-fired generator. Additionally, the market looks at whether it's cheaper to start up a resource or use one that's already running. Is it cheaper to keep a resource at the PMIN or start up another one? So far, we talked about the need for the day-ahead market and information about the bids that are used. The market optimization needs offer information to complete the plan for the day-ahead time frame. Let's take a look at that. The network model is like a map of the transmission lines, the load, and the generation. It's like a roadmap of the system. This provides the market with all of the options for flow, the supply to meet the demands. Transmission limits lets the market know how many megawatts of supply can flow on each transmission line. We also need to know the attributes of all the resources that are submitting economic bids into the market. We have a database with all of the participating resources that provide information such as how long it will take for a resource to start up, ramp rates, how many times per day it can be started up, how long you have to wait between startups, the maximum number of megawatts it can produce, type of fuel it uses, and so on. This information uses the market on how the resources can be used. Forecasts are used to predict the needs for the market day. These forecasts include demand forecasts as well as weather forecasts, providing insight into energy requirements and also the potential quantity of renewables that might be available. If it be a windy day, then wind turbines may be available. Transmission outages and resource outages will impact the amount of megawatts that can flow. The market uses this information in determining which resources can be awarded. Next, we'll look at the real-time timeline. Heidi?
Sorry about that. I was just looking for some answers. So real quickly, I need to do a little bit more research on what RATA stands for. I don't know if you're talking about resource adequacy. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more on that. But there were a couple of questions, and then there was another question that was submitted about how does the supply and demand associated with long-term bilateral contracts appear in the market? Are they self-scheduled bids, or does that energy just not bid into the market and buyers only pay or only bid for demand that is not covered by their long-term contracts? So those contracts can be put into the market in one of two different ways. So those bilaterals, they can be put in as self-schedules, and those can be put into cyber. So cyber is our scheduling infrastructure business rules. So that's the bidding tool that our scheduling coordinators use to input that information. So they can put those in as those self-schedule, again, megawatts only. They're also called price takers. So, whatever price that is. And then they'll have to figure out whatever that contract was outside of the market. They would be the ones that are, they would have to figure out, what was the contract that they settled with the supplier and the buyer, and then how would they flip those funds. We do have what's called inter-SC trades, and so the inter-SC trades would be, you'd still put that into cyber, or you could put that into, as an inter-SC trade, and then that's a service, a financial service that the ISO does, where you're still putting the information in there, but then ISO is basically flipping the money. And we talk about that more in our settlements courses. But they would be still put into the market, those bilateral contracts into cyber. And see a couple more questions real quick. And yeah, and just to kind of follow up on that again, the supply and demand associated with long-term contracts can either be bid in, like we said, in cyber. They can also be submitted by that self-schedule. So talked about that. And again, that RETA, David, thank you for responding. Basically, stack emission testing. I'm gonna have to look more into that because I'm not sure about how that works. And then also there was a question about the forecasting. How is day ahead demand forecasted? Is it hour ahead? We're looking at a lot of different timing that's going on. So we have a team that's our short-term forecasting, short-term unit commitments. We're looking at different time frames. So our forecasting team, they're looking out, they're looking back actually a couple of years in the past. They're looking at all the historical data, and then they're kind of looking out over different intervals, maybe a year ahead. What are we going to need? What are we going to need a month ahead? And then they're starting to look at also the intervals. So for day ahead, what is that forecast going to look like tomorrow? So every time we get closer to a different timing interval, it gets tuned up a little more. So they're going to be looking out, a day in advance for the day ahead. There's forecasting that goes in when we talk about these real-time processes and timing here. They're going to look at all these broken down intervals as well. So that forecasting is always looking out at different timing based on the intervals that we're looking at. But for day ahead, it's they're going to fine tune it in the real time for the hour ahead, and then 15-minute, 5-minute. But they're looking at it, since day ahead's looking at a 24-hour period, it's looking out over that. So, and that's good. That leads into what we're talking about here. And actually, can I grab your I'm going to ask to control your screen. Oh, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for a moment. Sorry about the delay. Hold on one quick second. Share my content. All right, can you see my screen now? Okay, if you can't see the
It is.
presentation, is it
It's
showing
saying
now?
it's share, starting to share.
There's a little delay here, so that's why I was like, okay, make sure. Okay, so yeah, just wanted to add a couple little things about the real time, and this kind of feeds into what Rodney was just talking about. So when we're looking at that real time market, there are different processes that are going on. So he just talked about the day ahead market processes. And then there are also processes that are going on in real time, and they're at different timing intervals, like I was just mentioning. So if we take a look here at this real-time market process screen, so 75 minutes prior to every trade hour, so each 24 hours in that day, 75 minutes prior to that hour is when we're looking at putting in the bids and hourly based schedules. Those are submitted. So it's going in ahead of time, and then there are market optimizations that are going on for the different timelines for every hour. And then there's also, so it's taking a look at that. Then there's also the 15-minute and the 5-minute markets. So when we talk about bids or base schedules, what's going in there, the bids would again be those financial bids, or it could be a self-schedule, that price taker of megawatts with no financial bid. And it could be the bids that have financial that are financial. Convergence bidding would not be part of real time. That's a day ahead activity, because by the time we get into real time, we want the actual megawatts to be able to show up and flow to maintain that reliability. So we've got those bids that are going in, but also base schedules. So we have our energy imbalance market, which Rodney's going to talk about here in a few slides. They would be putting in their base schedules because they're not participating in our day ahead market to let us know, how much capacity and energy they plan to, to be able to provide into the energy markets, or in what they're going to be able to actually flow during the different time intervals. So about 4.5 hours before, you asked about the day ahead forecasting. For the real time, about 4.5 hours ahead of each hour, we're forecasting conditions and making sure that we're looking at any additional power that might be needed, or, are we going to need to pull back? So again, when our forecasting team, they're looking not only at historical data of energy that flows, but they're also looking at the weather. They're looking at all kinds of different data that's going on, and then they're making those assessments, and then we can make those adjustments. So we start looking out 4.5 hours ahead, and then 75 minutes again prior to each hour. That's when the real-time market closes. And so that's all the base schedules and bids for real time need to be in by that 75 minutes prior to each hour. So that way there are some resource sufficiency tests that are going on for the EIM, making sure that they're coming into the market not leaning on any neighbors. And then we've got the bids that are being cleared. We're looking at that market power mitigation, et cetera. So the processes begin, the market optimization starts. 15 minutes ahead of the energy flow, that's when the market's doing another optimization. It's sending instructions for units to start up or shut down. If there are different units that are multi-stage units that, multi-stage generators that have different ways in which they operate, different configurations, we might be giving instructions on those, on how they need to transition to be able to supply the energy that we need or back off in real time. And so that 15-minute, that's also known as the 15-minute market, FMM, and for operations, it's known as the RTPD, the real-time pre-dispatch. Then we get to 5 minutes ahead of the energy flow. That's our real-time dispatch. At that point, the prices are set, and that's when we actually have our automated dispatch system that's dispatching that power. It's sending the actual instructions, not to not the startup and shutdowns, but it's saying this is what needs to flow in order to meet the demand. So it's matching up that supply and demand by actually flowing that power. So that 5 minute ahead, that's the real-time market, which is also known as real-time dispatch, RTD. So some of these processes, and we'll get to questions right after we go through these real-time processes. We'll answer the questions, and then we'll turn it back over to Rodney for some of his. But just so that we kind of have a little overview of what the processes look like for each one of the hours. For the real-time market processes, again, 75 minutes, no later than 75 minutes before each hour. That's when those schedules or bids will need to go in. And earlier there was that question about market power mitigation. And again, it's happening in each one of these hourly processes, making sure that there's no chance of market power mitigation based on where a unit's located. It's looking at a lot of different factors. We also have stuck. Again, that's looking out, 4.5 hours before, actually. That's our short-term unit commitment. So that's that 4.5 hour lookout. So every hour it's kind of looking out at that horizon to see what might need to be committed or decommitted 4.5 hours in advance. So that's every hour. And then every 15 minutes, that's when we have the RTUC or RTPD, like I was saying. So real-time unit commitment, FMM, which is the 15-minute market power mitigation, is happening at that time too. So again, in those 15-minute intervals, when the market's doing its optimization and considering all these different factors, it's also looking at market power mitigation at that point too. So every 15 minutes, that's happening. And then every 5 minutes, that's again where we have the real-time economic dispatch, that RTD, the real-time dispatch, and market power mitigation is happening then as well. Oops, sorry, went the wrong way. But then there are additional processes that may happen because as much planning as we do, we can plan it, everything is just set. The grid is going to do what the grid's going to do because you've got equipment, you've got, electricity, which, you can tell it where to go, but it's going to flow where it's going to flow. You might have equipment that are have outages, different things that are happening. We might have congestion in a certain area. There's lots of different things that could be happening that might require some adjustments when you get into real time. So maybe you've got everything planned and there's a big unit that goes out on some kind of an outage that is no longer available. Let's say we're now short 100 megawatts. We need to do something in order to refill those 100 megawatts because we still need it to meet that demand. So we've got a real-time contingency dispatch that can be run. So that's something that can run in the ISO's market. We've got real-time market dispatch and the contingency will run another solution. The manual dispatch is where the actual operators can go in and they can make adjustments because they're looking at the system as a whole and they're identifying where there are problems, where they can maybe redirect. So they can go into the systems and make incremental changes to rebalance the system because that's what our operators are doing, balancing that system. And then there's also exceptional dispatch. So that might be something that goes out as well. That's actually used in the EIM. So manual dispatch and exceptional dispatch are basically the same thing. Exceptional dispatch is used for EIM. And manual dispatch is used for the ISO market. So these are the processes that are going along through every hour, and it's a continual, so, when we say that the real market closes, it's closing for that hour, but it's continually. So each hour is going to have the close of the real-time market 75 minutes before, and then these processes are being either run or looked at or making adjustments to make sure that we keep those lights on, because like I said, everything has to be balanced. The frequency, the supply and demand, everything needs to remain in balance. So before, I'm going to go ahead and end my part of the presentation, and I'm going to let Rodney go ahead and bring his back up. But right now, I'm going to take a look at the questions. Trying to stop sharing. So I saw a couple of questions about, so we're not controlling the generation units. We are not controlling those. The ISO is overseeing those, the resources and sending instructions to the different entities that are the resource owners. So as part of going through the scheduling coordinator process, there are agreements, and we can dispatch energy. The market can dispatch that energy after their test. It can be dispatched through ADS, but we don't own anything. We do not want to, we don't own any. We don't do any of the maintenance, etc. And because I saw ADS, so automated dispatch system. That is a system that is connected to the resources. It can send out dispatches very quickly and be regulating those units. So this is a system that's sending out what we call dispatch operating targets, and those are the instructions to tell the different units what they're going to be providing. So it's another system that would be used, again, as you're going through the process. That would be something that you're going through so that the market can actually be controlling those. So I think that's all the questions that we have right now. Any other questions before we turn it back to Rodney? So is the sag and overhead transmission lines and calculations factored into the capacity? It's factored into our LMP, our locational marginal pricing. So there are loss factors that are considered when we're determining what the price is. And I'm sure with the capacity as well, we've got to take all those things into consideration. So just like weather, we're taking that into consideration. We're to determine how much is going to be needed. So those tests are looking at, where are the transmission lines, where are they located? What are the resources that are available? So all of that is modeled into our full network model. And so that's part of the data that is going in to determine how much we're going to need. So it is, looked at in, in our forecasting to figure out what you're going to need, but it's also in our LMP. It's a part of a component of the pricing. So it is taken into consideration as well. All right. If no other questions, then I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Rodney right now and let him take us through some reliability.
Heidi, for all the great information. I really appreciate you taking to those questions for me. So now the ISO is responsible for the constant and reliable flow of electricity for the health, safety, and welfare of consumers. So maintaining reliability is a balancing act that requires a lot of expertise in controlling many moving parts. So what is reliability? In short, it's all about keeping the lights on, and our system operators is at the front of this task. So our operators are responsible for maintaining the reliability of the grid by balancing supply and demand using various resource types. Operators are located in 2 control centers, which are continuously connected in real time through instant video conferencing capability. Both control rooms are operated 24/7, and though Folsom is the primary control room, Lincoln is sharing duties so the operation of the grid can be transferred between control rooms at any time. There are multiple redundancies on all the systems, providing one of the highest levels of dependability in computer system operations. As mentioned in the last slide, reliability of electric grid is our primary focus. Electricity is a unique commodity in that it is produced, delivered, and consumed at the speed of light. And through this process, the goal is to maintain grid frequency at 60 Hertz in order to keep the system safe and the lights on. Electricity is produced by the supply, which consists of generation and imports. Electricity is delivered via transmission and distribution lines and then consumed by the demand, which are the load and exports. Maintaining this balance between these two is similar to driving on a highway and trying to keep your car at 60 miles per hour. Like a gas pedal on a car, in order to maintain 60 Hertz, you either increase or decrease generation to meet the changes in demand. Because of its instantaneous nature, the ISO uses technology that takes the pulse of the system every few seconds, and our highly skilled and trained system operators constantly monitor multiple bits of data to be able to instantly react to fluctuating conditions such as weather changes and supply shortfalls or surpluses. There are a number of ways to participate in the ISO market, and any interactions where the ISO will provide services require entities to go through processes that consist of signing contracts and non-disclosure agreements, passing tests, and gaining access to applications as necessary. Depending on the resource capabilities, market participants can elect to bid into the energy and ancillary services market or sell electric products. Physical supply and demands are bids for those resources that have the ability to provide or consume the energy needed on the bulk electric system. Convergence bids, or bids for virtual supply or virtual demand, are financial positions taken in the day-ahead market and liquidated in the real-time market. Convergence bidding is designed to reduce the average price differences between the day-ahead and the real-time, as well as the volatility between the difference between the day-ahead and the real-time prices. Ancillary services are considered capacity products and help maintain the reliability of the grid by ensuring that we have additional resources held back in reserve so that we have the ability to handle different types of contingency events, whether short-term regulation or operational needs that must be covered within a 10-minute window. Residual unit commitment is a way to ensure that the ISO procures enough capacity to meet the day-ahead forecast by bridging the gap between the physical resources that clear the day-ahead market compared to the forecasted demand for that day. Flexible ramping products provide additional upward and downward flexible ramping capacity to account for uncertainty due to demand and renewable forecast errors in the real-time market. It ensures that some unloaded capacity is reserved to dispatch energy if needed. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the ISO is now providing reliability coordination services for the majority of the Western interconnection. Congestion revenue rights are financial instruments made available through allocation and auction processes that enable rights holders to manage congestion cost variability based on locational marginal pricing. These rights are acquired primarily for offsetting congestion costs that occur in the day-ahead market. Inter-SC trades are an optional accounting service that we offer to help facilitate financial transactions between entities. Though there are many ways to interact with the ISO, only a scheduling coordinator is authorized to transact business directly with the ISO. A scheduling coordinator is an entity authorized by the ISO to buy and sell power in the ISO markets. SC bids are scheduled their supply into the market or submit demand bids, and then based on awards, energy flows across the transmission system and is distributed to customers by local utilities. If an entity chooses not to become a scheduling coordinator, it would need to contract the services of a certified SC to participate on their behalf. SCs may include convergence bidders, demand response providers, utility-owned generation, independent generators, energy imbalance market participants, and power marketers. Power marketers are entities that do not own or use generation, but act as a broker between power sellers and power buyers. There's a process that entities must complete in order to be qualified as a scheduling coordinator, including maintain mandatory training, financial and testing requirements, as well as ongoing adherence to policies. For more information on becoming an SC, visit the ISO website or refer to the Scheduling Coordinator Certification and Termination BPM Section 5.3 certification requirements. The Energy Imbalance Market, or EIM, is an extension of the ISO's real-time market offered to any balancing authority in the Western area of North America. It provides a low-cost, low-risk option that balances load and resources automatically and economically. Full market members seamlessly participate in both the day-ahead and the real-time markets, while Energy Imbalance Markets, or EIM, entities only participate in the real-time market. Participants are able to submit bids which will be utilized by the ISO to optimize energy transfer and generation output between all EIM participants in both 15 and 5-minute increments. EIM's objective is to minimize the total cost of serving energy demand of the entire EIM area while simultaneously respecting the boundaries between balancing authority areas, the responsibility of the entities that manage them, and the transmission rights that connect them. The ISO operates the only EIM in the West and uses advanced ISO market systems which automatically choose low-cost resources to reliably meet customer demand. We have several participants in the energy imbalance market, with more planned to join in coming years. On the left, in a non-EIM environment, there are a limited pool of balancing resources, high economic levels of reserve, economic inefficiencies, and increased costs, integration costs. In an EIM, we have diversity of balancing resources, decreased flexibility reserves, more economically efficient, and decreased integration costs. EIM entities see benefits from better, cost-effective dispatch of internal resources to each EIM area. Economic transfers that happen between areas, the area sending power supplies in excess, or the area receiving power does not have to dispatch expensive resources. Every time we add an EIM entity, the benefits are realized for that entity, but there are also compounded effects to other EIMs. If you take a look at the benefits reports located at the westerneim.com, you'll see from the trend the benefit grows in a non-linear fashion. So if we take a look at the market process timelines, Heidi's going to walk us through what this looks like. Heidi?
Oh, thank you very much, Rodney. Let me go ahead. I just wanted to let everyone know I was kind of taking a look at the questions here, and while I get this up, there's a couple of questions that, as a reminder, this is being recorded and this presentation will be posted. So after this course, we'll go ahead and we're going to send you a link to a survey. We're going to send you, this will be located on our Learning Center. We'll probably have it posted in the next couple of days, along with a PDF of today's slides that we're covering. So let me start this. And there was a question about solar PV. So I actually just sent a message to our customer service group to see if there are any initiatives right now that are dealing specifically with solar PV. We'll talk a little bit later about our process for stakeholders that you can get more information, but I just did send a message about that. So I'm sorry I missed that question a little bit earlier, but we'll get some information to you about that. And flex capacity, it does have an impact on the market. So that's why we've got different mechanisms. From an EIM standpoint, our energy imbalance market, we there are certain requirements that they have to pass every hour with their flex sufficiency. We've got our flexible ramping product. So we always make sure that that's another mechanism that's in there that is not just part of the market. You get, you can get paid for being held back for that flexibility, but it does impact the market because we're making sure, because like we said earlier, reliability is the most important part. So these kind of processes that we have to make sure that we hold back certain capacity to be able to meet those uncertainty needs, that is going to be held back. So again, the market's doing that optimization, figuring out which one of the resources will be best for that. So we could point you to some more information here, and I've seen a couple of other questions about getting in contact with our groups. I'll show you some information a little bit later. And then if you have specific groups that you want to get in, specific questions that you want us to follow up on, just go ahead and put that in the chat. We'll make sure we get back to you. All right, so let me get back to our presentation here. So settlements. So Rodney's taken you through a lot of great information, and now we're going to talk about, oops. Hang on just one quick moment. Getting ahead of myself here. Trying to do too many things at one time. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and then I will, then I'll keep talking about settlements. So Rodney's taken you through a lot of great information about our day-ahead market, our real-time market, about the different groups that we have here at the ISO, who does what. And so this part is when we start talking about our, we really start getting into the settlements. So everything that's done, everything that we do to maintain reliability, that is all, that's all taken into account, but it all has to be accounted for, and it comes down to the market, to the money. And so we'll go ahead and go through our settlements or our post-market processes at this time. So we've got the day ahead, the real time, plus all the other, stuff that's happened even before this timeline happens. And then we get to the post-market. So this is going to be a very high level overview. We do have workshops that go into depth in settlements. So we'll try to bring it up to a higher level at this point. But to give you a general idea of what's happening for a participating resource in market, we have market participants that are going to take positions. So like Rodney was talking about earlier, you put in bids, you put in base schedules. There's all that information that is taken into account. We look at all the different inputs that are part of what those resources are. So we have all the resource characteristics of, all generators, of all the transmission lines, et cetera. All that data is taken into account, as well as the financial pieces of the scheduling coordinators, those market participants. So you do have to go through a process, like Rodney said earlier, to actually participate in the market. If we have a resource that is not a scheduling coordinator and they don't want to become a scheduling coordinator, but they want to participate in the market, then they need to get procure the services of a scheduling coordinator to do that market participation on their behalf, including the settlements. So we've got market participants that take positions, and then that market optimization is happening. So again, all these different factors. So when we look at how the money works out, and we start looking at the timelines and why it takes so long, it's because $1 bid, $1 awarded does not necessarily equal $1 that you're going to be paid, because there are a lot of different factors that are taken into account. There are a lot of calculations that are lined out in our business practice manuals and their configuration guides. So there are charge codes that have all these equations that are taking into account so many different factors. And so the market is looking at all of that, making sure that we have those reliable operations. And then that ends up coming out in our settlements, payments, and charges. So that's our engine, so we've got the market engine that's making those optimizations. And then after things run, we've got the settlements that's looking at all of this, and it's got an engine that's running to figure out who should be paid, who should be paying, and are these values right? How should it be paid, and then how should it be allocated? So we've got the markets, settlements are broken down by the different markets. Earlier, we talked about the different timelines. So we've got the intervals, we've got the day ahead, we've got real time, we've got the, you're looking at an hour, but that's broken down into our 15-minute market. So we've got each hour, there are 4 FMM intervals, 4 15-minute markets. And then we've got 12 5-minute markets for each hour. And if we look at this very, very simplified example, just to give us an idea, for each one of these intervals, we need to get the data that's coming in from the meters, from the schedules that are coming in, all the different inputs that are going in for the day ahead and the real-time markets. We need to have that go into the settlement system, and that is all compared against one another to determine how that billing is going to look. And all that information, that data has to become settlement quality meter data for each one of these intervals to be able to be used for those billable quantities. So again, we've got the initial day ahead award, that day ahead. So anything that happens, any awards, any charges, that's going to receive it's going to be basically a line item on your settlement statements for each interval for the different resources. So you're going to get that breakdown of information, but what happens in the day ahead stays in the day ahead is kind of our little motto here. So that is going to be billed for a day, shown as a separate line item than the 15 minutes. So you're also going to see if there was an incremental award. Let's say this was a simple example of one resource. Let's say that resource was awarded 120 megawatts. You would see that 120 megawatts on the settlement statement. But then if it was awarded that extra 24 megawatts, you would see that as a separate line item. So it wouldn't just give you a total at the end of the day of adding all these up. It would show separately. And then if you got another incremental award in real time, that would show as a separate line item too. So this is just a simplified picture, just to kind of give you that idea that everything is broken down on our settlement statements, and why it can start to get pretty complicated when we start looking at all the numbers. So a moment ago, I talked to you about the settlement quality meter data. I mentioned that. So meter data is critical to be able to balance what what's going to be charged or paid for each one of the resources. So that meter data is going to be collected in order to be processed for settlements. It can come in one of 2 ways, depending on how an entity qualifies. It can be, they could do it as a scheduling coordinator metered entity. That means that they're going through a process, pulling their own data, processing that raw data, which is revenue quality meter data. They're going to process that and send that into the ISO as settlement quality meter data. Or we've got ISO metered entities, which those are the ones that contract with the ISO to pull that data on their behalf. So when that data is pulled on their behalf, we have a process here that is taking that revenue quality meter data and putting it through a process, or basically a refinement process. That's the validation, estimation, and editing, our V process, that turns that raw data into that settlement quality meter data that can actually be consumed by our settlement system for the proper billing. And so it's really important, and there are tests that are run on the meters, because incorrect meter data can cause significant financial impacts in your settlements. So the settlements processes that we have the settlement cycle processes to produce those payments and charges. We take, again, those inputs from the day ahead, everything that we've been talking about before, all those bids that went in, the awards, all the different data that's going in there. We're considering if there are any outages. We're looking at fuel types, et cetera. All of that information is from day ahead, real time, and again, the meter. That's all being taken in as inputs from the day ahead. And then those are put through those calculations of the different formulas that are listed in our configuration guides. And then based on the results, that's when we have the publishing of settlement statements, invoices, and payment advices. So we get the settlement statements that come out that give you, all the information of what's going to be either paid or expected to be paid. And then the invoices are the actual, that's, if you receive an invoice, that means that's what you're going to need to be paying into the market. And then you've got, if you get a payment advice, that's when that's what you're going to be getting back from the market. Now we say it's from the market because a lot of people say, I'm paying the ISO, but really it's the market. We're just facilitating the market, acting as a clearinghouse for everyone. And so, that's why we have a process that can go kind of lengthy, because we want to make sure that everybody's getting, paying their fair share or getting allocated their fair share. So timelines are very critical to make sure that that we can maintain a market that everyone is being paid fair, that's transparent, that is whole. And so we have invoices and payment, those invoices and payment advices that you'll receive every Wednesday. So if you're a scheduling coordinator, based on what you saw in the settlement statements, then you're going to either get that payment advice or the invoice by Wednesday to let you know what that amount is that needs to be paid into the market. You'll receive those for trading days Monday through Sunday. And again, and sometimes there might be adjustments for holidays, but in general, this is how the process works. Then every Tuesday by 10 a.m., that is what time, if you received an invoice, by 10 a.m., no later than, you need to submit that payment. And the reason that needs to be in is because we need to turn that money around and send it back out, disperse that back out to the people that have earned that money, that have supplied the energy, and so, or that deserve money, coming back from the different allocations. So we need to be able to turn that around and send that back out as soon as possible. We do have dispute processes. So, if somebody thinks, I don't want to pay this, it's not right, still need to get those payments in. Then we go through the processes of, double checking, triple checking, making sure that all the calculations are correct. So it can be a lengthy process to get it all settled out. But we need to make sure that that money is paid into the market so that we can get it back to those who deserve it. Because as a not-for-profit, we don't just have a huge reserve that we can just keep pulling from. We want to make sure that we're, getting it back out there. This year, we started a new timeline for our settlements. And before, if you'd seen it in the past, it was capped at 36 months. And so we've managed to look at it and try to figure out how can we make this even more efficient and get this process into a more manageable time frame to get everything settled out. And so this new process here for T, when you see that would refer back to the trade date. Any of the B's, that's business days, and then M's are the months after the business after the trade date. So when we have a trade date, the day that the energy is flowing, we've got our market price corrections. So we run those, 2 of those. We do that at 3 business days after the trade date, and then we do it again at 5 business days after the trade date. Then we pull that meter data at seven days after the trade date. That is looked at based upon what those market price corrections were. And then that is what ends up, we run those calculations, and that's what ends up on that initial settlement statement. And so then like I said, there are chances to dispute. If someone gets that, again, they're going to have to still be paying whatever those settlement statements are expecting them to pay, but they can put in disputes, and they can do that up to T plus 22 business days after the trade date. And then we do another meter data pull, make sure that that is settlement quality meter data that's going in there. So at 52 business days after the trade date, that's when we're going to do another meter data pull, and then you're going to have that last required statement at 70 business days after the trade date. So we used to have multiple dates when you would get settlement statements plus then the optional. Now there's two, again at 9 business days and 70 business days after the trade date. Again, then you have 22 business days after that statement to be able to, and I misspoke earlier, it's 22 business after the settlement statement comes out for nine business days after, and then at 70 business days after. Then you've got 22 business days from that settlement statement to put any of your disputes into CITI, which is our customer information and dispute inquiry. I think I got that backwards, but it's our application where you could actually log your disputes, and our settlements team goes into that and does all the calculations and does all that research. The optional statements are if perhaps there's another dispute, and so it made some impacts on someone else. So these other statements may come out at 11 months, 21 months, and 24 months after the trade date. And again, those would just be incremental based on, wouldn't go all the way back to the initial values. It would be incremental based on any changes that are made from each one of those dates. And you can see where there's disputes that are available then as well. So this can get pretty complicated. So there is a calendar, our payment calendar that's located on our website. That is a tool that you can use in order to figure out what's going to be paid on what day, and looking back at which one of these business days, which trade date am I looking at to determine what I'm going to need to be paying or being paid for. And thank you, Rada. I saw that you put CITI, what the true definition is, in the chat. So thank you. Before I go into more information, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to go ahead and start the show again. Hold on. But I'm going to look at our questions here because I think I saw some come in. So let me bring up the chat. So again, Rada, thanks for putting that up there. Are there any other questions that anyone has about settlements? All right. Like I said, there's a really good class workshops that we have available that will take you a deeper dive into settlements if you wanted more information about that, as well as a deeper dive into more of the information that we shared today. So where can you go for more information? Swap this view, sorry about that. So we've got our website. You can go to www.caiso.com for a lot more information and different resources that can help you be successful as you're participating in the ISO. So we've got resource tabs that are at the top. Under each one of these tabs, you're going to find a lot more information. About us, has some history about us, participate. That's where you're going to find information on the applications, the access, different technical guides for that. how to participate. We've got our learning center under there, or different processes that you can participate in. Stay informed. How can you get more of the messages, stakeholdering processes? We've got information about planning. So earlier, Rodney was talking about that. We've got lots of information about transmission, planning processes, new resource information, et cetera. Then we've got market and operations. So that's where you're going to find more information about settlements, about markets. You're going to find it about operations as well. So a lot of different data that you're going to be able to take a look at. Under the rules, that's where you're going to find our tariff. So everything is defined in our tariff, but we also have business practice manuals that you can find there that will give you a little more explanation, clarity on what the tariff is saying. And then you can also find operating procedures if you're someone that's in operations and wants that are public ones. So there's a lot of great information there. And then we also have ISO and Espanol. So that's another section that we have there. All right, then we have our calendar. So that's a great resource to be able to go to. And you could click on, there's different tabs in there about new releases, recent documents, market notices. But that's a great way to take a look at and see what kind of meetings are we having. There are technical group meetings, there are market meetings, there are settlements groups meetings. So there's lots of different meetings that we have, training events. So if you don't, have a look at this yet, I encourage you to look at the calendar and keep an eye on that. Add things to your calendar that you would want to participate in. We also have today's Outlook. That has a lot of great information for you, prices, etc. We have a slide here in just a moment that'll show you what more of that information is. But you can see a lot of different information about resource mixes, etc. Should I skip this? So we've also got related websites, and there's one for Market Participant Portal as well as a Western EIM portal. There's the RC West portal. Those do require a certificate to get in, so you've got to be a customer that gets into those. But we do have websites that are dedicated to more specific for our different customer groups. There's also a developer page. So I think someone had asked about that a little earlier. The developer page is really good if you're the technical person and want to get more involved, more information. You can sign up to get into that page. Plus, we've got Oasis. That is all the public resource reports that are out there. Again, there's public. There are some private ones that you have to have access to, certificates to access certain proprietary tools. But there is a lot of information that's out there. And then also there's the RC West page, as well as a Western EIM website page. There's also a lot of different information about our board, about our business practice manuals that you can get to, alerts, warnings, and notifications. So if you want to stay up on that, daily briefing, I'll show you what that is here in a moment, but I encourage you all, if you haven't already, please sign up for the daily briefing. You'll get one email about 1 o'clock every day that will give you it will give you any market notices that have come out and kind of what's happening at the ISO. It's a really great resource that you can sign up for, as well as other subscriptions and notifications. This is something that was just published, and it's our August 2020 report. So this is going to cover what happened in mid-August when we had the shortages, the outages that happened. So this final report has been posted. So if you click on the link here on our website, if you're interested, that is going to take you directly to the document so you can do more research on that. So again, I mentioned the Western EIM website. This is here, it's got a link. So when you get this page, you can take a look at that link and go ahead and go to it. Again, the RC West page, this is their website that you can go to. we talked just slightly about our operators. There are a couple of videos that we did. They're a little bit older now, but they're really good resources for you to kind of get an idea of a day in the life for a system operator as well as for a market operator, so that you kind of get it from their view. And they're the ones that are really doing a lot of this, maintaining the reliability and working with our market customers, the real-time market customers. So I encourage you to check out those YouTube videos because they're pretty interesting. Again, Oasis, I mentioned that, a lot of different reports that are in here. So if you're looking at information on prices, system demand, energy, and ancillary services, congestion revenue rights, public bids, etc. There's a lot of different information that you can find. You might have to dig quite a bit because there's a lot of information, but it is there and it is public. When I mentioned today's outlook, you could see all the different pieces. There's information about demand, the resource supply and renewable mixes, and you've got information about emissions that are coming out. So there's a lot of good information, but there's also the price map. We call it our Skittles map. That's going to give you an idea of what the prices are looking like in the different intervals, a day ahead, in the 15-minute market, and also the 5-minute market. And you can also download this to your phone if you wanted to have that. So you can find that on our website and be able to download that. I mentioned the business practice manuals before. They give a lot more detail, but there's also a process for the market participants to stay involved and actually be able to give their input. Excuse me. We call it our, excuse me, I'm so sorry about that. Our proposed revision request, our PRR process. So you can see what kind of changes are being made to, excuse me, what kind of changes are being made to the different BPMs that have been maybe suggested by the ISO, by DMM, by client customers. So anyone can be submitting some changes, requests for clarification in the BPM. I'm so sorry, pardon me. And then again, the daily briefing, I really encourage you to sign up. Sorry, let me go back. Sign up here under the subscriptions and notifications, and that way you'll make sure that you get that daily briefing, a lot of good information, and some other things that you might want to subscribe to on this page. We also have a news page, and this is going to keep you updated on a lot of different information that's happening in the, not just for the ISO, but in the energy industry as well. So you're going to find a lot of different notices, emails. You're going to find different newsletters, news releases, if there are any kinds of alerts, warnings, and emergencies that go out there. And they also have some helpful links. So that's a good page to go to as well if you want to get a lot of good energy information. And just a moment ago, I mentioned the developer site. So if you are somebody that's wanting to be involved more in the technical side, more information, you can sign up for that today. And our Learning Center, which many of you hopefully saw in order to sign up for this course, this is our teams page, our customer readiness page. We're always adding more information. There are CBTs, computer-based trainings that are available here. You can sign up for training courses on this page, as well as find those CBTs that are available. And you also could find the market tracks or learning tracks. You can find market operations, anything that's for the EIM, the energy imbalance market that we can make public, that is located on there, settlements and metering, as well as congestion revenue rights and reference. So we are constantly updating this information and putting out different courses that you can look at under the new modules. So there's a lot of different churn on this. We encourage you to keep an eye on this page as well, because this is going to give you lots of learning opportunities. And we're continuing to drive toward more self-service for this kind of learning. And then in this packet that you're going to receive, there are different links. Oops, I'm sorry. Different links to things that we have referred to in today's presentation. And so you'll be able to find that there. We would like to hear from you. So again, we're going to be sending out an email to you after this with your evaluation on how we could improve our courses, what you'd like to see in some of these courses, especially as we develop more of the self-service. So we'll send that out. We really appreciate you all filling that out and responding to that, because that's the only way that we can get better. And if you have any questions, you can contact us at customerreadiness@caiso.com. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I want to say thank you very much. We'll go ahead and see if we have any questions before I turn it back over to Rodney to close us out. I'm not seeing anything right now or hearing anyone. I don't think I see anybody raising their hands. So if you do have a question, go ahead and throw it in the chat. Send us an email after. I'll be around for a little bit because there are a couple of questions that came in that I want to follow up with. A couple that we didn't get answered today, but when I send out the email later and give you and send you the link to the evaluation, I will put the answers to the questions that we have in there so that everyone gets the answers to those questions as well. All right, so with no other questions, Rodney, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to go ahead and conclude today's session. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Heidi. So thank you everyone for joining today. Heidi and myself and walking you guys through the Welcome to the ISO session. So as Heidi said, we will be sending you guys out the information to make sure that you guys have the deck, and any subsequent questions that we are unable to answer, we will have those answered for you. For some of you that I responded to directly through chat, we will make sure that we encompass all of these questions for you guys so that way you guys can have the full breadth of the information. So I really appreciate you guys' patience today. Heidi says she's going to be sticking around for a while, so we thank you guys for your patience, and we look forward to working with you guys again soon. Thank you.
So have a great day.